when we laughed through the smoke and the smell. Going home in the rain, running up the dark lane, past the jail and down behind the fountain. Those were happy days in so many, many ways. In the town I loved so well.
Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't know, that is a song by Phil Coulter called The Town I Love So Well. Just to give you a little bit of background to myself, I'm clearly from Northern Ireland. You'll hear that within 3 lines of me talking anyway. But the reason I used that song is that the peace process in Northern Ireland, completed in 1998, was delivered by people who were neither great leaders nor known for their teamwork. And in fact, both Gerry Adams and Ian Paisley had never been in the same room together, but actually felt so passionately that they had to do something to deliver the peace process that they delivered it. And this song was played in the White House every time they met. So these grown men with tears in their eyes would celebrate the fact that they had worked together to deliver something that would transform Northern Ireland. Okay, over to me. I am Northern Irish, as I've said. I went from an all-Catholic nun school with Sister Aloysius to an all-girls Protestant school in Northern Ireland, and that was highly unusual in the late 70s. There were only 4 Catholics in the school, the 3 of us, my 2 sisters and I, and a French girl with the unfortunate name of Michelle Hoare, who I've never forgotten. So it was really difficult, and the reason I raise that story is that I went into an environment where I was a little mouse, and I've got lots of my team in front of me, and they will be quite shocked to hear that I was ever a mouse, but I was. And what I'm actually going to talk about today is that leaders are made and not born. And what unlocked leadership for me is that I was quite good at hockey, so I was the captain of the hockey team, and I had to do speeches for all the welcoming teams. And the more I did it, the more I learned that the better you get. Not that I'm bigging myself up today in any way at all. This picture is my family, just to let you know. They're incredibly supportive. My husband is a rock musician, which was very un-John Lewis. He wore more hairspray and makeup than I did, even when I was head of beauty. And in fact, I never ever wear hairspray, as you probably can see. These are my 3 children, my pride and joy. Danny, who is 6'5", is just studying for A-levels. And Maggie and Johnny are both at Norwich University studying law. However, I think Johnny might be learning more about poker than law at the minute. I spent 33 years in John Lewis, having planned to spend 3. But in 30 years, I did more than 26 different jobs. And I would always say to people, move before you're ready. Move constantly, because every time you move, you learn something. You learn what you're good at, what you're not good at. You learn how great teams work and how not such great teams work. So I would always encourage people to move forward and move on. After 33 years, I left John Lewis in August and have just set up a retail consultancy with my colleagues in front here. There's a lot of themes here in terms of numbers, but we are called Retail100 Consulting, because we have, you guessed it, 100 years of retail experience between us. I know we don't look old enough. They certainly don't. But what we're going to do with this consultancy is that we're going to turn consultancy on its head. We're going to be a consultancy company with a difference. I generally know that people don't welcome consultants with open arms when they're in business, and we didn't either. But actually, what we want to do is build trust and collaboration and absolutely get people there quickly, but at the same time make those teams look good. It's not about making us look good, it's about making you look good. So today I have, I think, about 30 minutes to talk about my 33 years. Questions will be welcome. I'm happy during the session or after the session. But I have a final 3 for you in a typically Irish way. And it is that I have been held at gunpoint 3 times in my life. It's taught me a lot about bravery and tenacity. And also that, as I say, life never works out how you plan it to. Okay. My team thought I'm famous for quotes. This quote is by Winston Churchill. He's not someone I quote often. But the key to a leader's impact is sincerity. Before he can inspire with emotion, he must be swayed by it himself. Before he can move their tears, his own must flow. To convince them, he must himself believe. Leadership is the art of getting people to do what must be done. But you must do it with authenticity and sincerity. The key as leader is also to figure out what must be done. You need to be clear, and you need to take people with you. And leadership is an art. It's not a science. The key to that is that it's a lesson that you learn and a muscle that you build, and I'm still learning it. Great leadership and great teams contain 3 key elements: intellectual diversity, psychological safety, and a purpose that's worth fighting for. Of course, rarely do these fall into place without some help. They require leadership, either in the form of an individual or a group of people leading a team. Teams need leaders who recognize what needs to be done, and they must turn an organizational mission into a cause worth fighting for. No man will make a great leader who wants to do it all himself or get all the credit for doing it. I'm sure many of us have worked for people who have been like this, and it's the most unrewarding way to work. A little bit of history about me. I had been in John Lewis 8 months when the managing director called me to his office and said, "How would you like to run Christmas stationery and stationery?" I'd absolutely no idea what he was talking about, but of course said yes. I managed people who generally had been in the business 20 to 30 years. And I was sitting in my office reading what was called charge sheets in those days. These guys will know what they are. And I had absolutely no clue what I was doing. And it was for tens of thousands of pounds of invoices. So I turned to the clerk next to me and said, "You need to help me with this. I don't know what I'm doing." And as a manager, you were charged with your stock take. If you had a bad stock take, everybody knew about it. And particularly because I'd only been in the branch 8 months, everybody wanted to know what my stock take was going to be. So Jill had been under real duress, this clerk of mine, but she taught me how to do charge sheets. We had the best stock take in the shop, but I didn't take credit for it. I went to the managing director and asked for what was called a one step beyond for Jill, my clerk, and said that she had done all the work and she had transformed it. And he said to me, "It's the cleverest kind of leadership that I would expect from someone as young as you, to do this and build Jill up, and you're very clever to have done it this way." I wasn't clever at all. I was just honest and authentic. And watching her performance flourish after that was one of the best things that I'd ever seen, and something that I continue to do throughout John Lewis. Really important, surround yourself with teams who you can trust and listen to. Leaders don't have to have all the answers, but they need to surround themselves with people who can help them get there. So I'm going to go through the leadership traits that I'm going to focus on today. I mean, you could pick 100 leadership traits. When you read a book on leadership, it makes you feel quite intimidated. You think, do I have to be all of these things? But you'll see that number 1 for me is authenticity, and I've absolutely believed that that's one of the most important characteristics of a leader. Phil Knight from Nike is shy. He's not a jump up and down cheerleader kind of guy. He is a poor public speaker, he would say himself. But he's incredibly authentic. And he said, don't tell people how to do things. Tell them what to do and let them surprise you with their results. And when Phil Knight was speaking at a meeting in the 1990s about trade, his emotions were obvious. This is a man who is driven by performance, by competition, and by winning. And yet, he showed his tears and could barely finish this conference in the 1990s. And he was totally authentic, and his team understood this. It was real. I've just been reading the Nike book, Shoe Dog. It is the best. I can see people knowing it. It is the best business book I've ever read. It's like a thriller in terms of how much money they burn through and how they're ever going to get through it. I can't recommend it highly enough. I read it in about a day. Another CEO who I think shows real authenticity is Ryan Gellert, the CEO of Patagonia. He drives a second-hand car. He calls out people if they are greenwashing. He is totally authentic with his team, and he calls them out quite randomly. So really, really important, totally authentic. And his vision is, what cause do I serve? What is my role as a leader for this business? I have done this lots in John Lewis. I was a partnerships counsellor along with my friend Dan, who's sitting here supporting me in the front row. And we called out between us where we saw things that weren't right. And we did it with real honesty and bravery. And we did it so that the people who wanted us to share that knowledge could do it in the comfort that it wasn't coming back to them. I led on diversity and inclusion and called out to our new chairwoman and our managing director where John Lewis had fallen down quite dramatically on diversity and inclusion. I then stepped back because the leaders of diversity and inclusion in John Lewis were an Irish woman, a Scots woman, and a New Zealander, and I kind of felt that that lacked diversity. So I stepped back to get someone else to step up. But it was really important to be honest and authentic about what I thought. Dan, who was sitting in front of me, did an amazing speech when I left John Lewis. There were tears, I promise you, not enforced, but he called out that I was a fearless and caring leader. So that's fearless and caring, not fearful and careless. And what he said is, thank you, Anna, for simply trusting us and letting us get on with it. And that's how I had the best teams in John Lewis. And there were a number of suppliers here today who always said to me, you have the most amazing teams. And I did, because I just let them get on with it. They knew what they were doing, and I trusted them. Decisiveness is a really important quality of a leader. And leaders have to make decisions. You absolutely do have to do the analysis, but paralysis by analysis is a huge problem in many, many businesses. And sometimes you just have to go with your gut. It's absolutely key. A bad decision is often better than no decision at all. But risk management is really critical there. I'll give an example. When you're a new young buyer, you think everything you buy is absolutely brilliant. You convince yourself it's going to sell, gets to week 6 and it gets to week 8 and it hasn't sold, and you still think it's going to be okay. If it isn't going to sell in the first 8 weeks, guys, it isn't going to sell. And I learned very early on in jewelry that you kind of sometimes have to walk away. So one of my claims to fame was getting in a huge jewelry supplier that we'd taken a year to get into John Lewis. And this brand took over £2 million in 10 weeks and 10 branches, and everybody was fating it. And it was fabulous for about 5 minutes, until we realized we had 217 weeks worth of stock of this brand. And we could not get this brand to agree with us on how we would order stock and order the best sellers, because they insisted that we ordered packs of this brand. Now, the supplier was an ex-menswear supplier of mine, so I had a great relationship with him, and I tried to get this company to agree, but they wouldn't. So we walked away, and people were quite shocked that we were going to walk away, but we had to take the decision. We had to be decisive because it was not good for the business. And we walked away here. I think this was the last time I was at Birmingham when we walked away from this brand. But as we walked away from them, we shook hands, and I had another brand waiting in the wings to go into those 10 stores, so we mitigated the risk. They didn't take quite as much money, but we didn't have 200 weeks worth of stock. So sometimes you just have to make the decision. Accept the responsibility and do it. Another example is when we were trying to get the beauty brand MAC into John Lewis. It had taken us 8 years, and we still hadn't got them in because we were too late to the party. So I just happened to be the last in the firing line, and we went down to Southampton. We'd done this amazing romance pack about how incredible Southampton was, and we had the vice president of MAC and the director of retail and the director of design all in the room, and they'd done this fabulous pack on how amazing Southampton would be. And in mid-pitch of this pack, I was watching this vice president and realized she wasn't remotely interested in Southampton at all. So I said to the guy next to me, I said, go with me. And I said, okay, let's flip to the last 5 pages of the pack. Let's ignore where we are, visible intakes of breath, and let's go straight to the online business, because actually I think that's more compelling for you. And for the first time ever, we could launch online first. It's got a younger customer profile. It's absolutely right for your business. So we turned that meeting on its head. And the design director said to me, I have never seen anything that brave. And it was quite instinctive and quite brave, but also I knew we'd lost it anyway, so it actually wasn't that brave. If we didn't do it, we'd have lost them. So sometimes you just have to make that decision. Focus. Do first things first, second things not at all, or the alternative is to get nothing done. This is my biggest challenge, and my team were looking at me. This was always my struggle. I thought everything was brilliant. I thought we could deliver everything, and prioritizing and actually focusing was one of the things I absolutely learned to do late in life. I had to manage my passion. I was passionate for every product and everything we could deliver, but I nearly killed my teams in getting them to do it. So it's one thing to get your teams, stretch them and drive them forward. It's another thing to drive them nuts with stuff that they can't deliver. So this this was my biggest lesson, was to learn to focus. Didn't always get it right, and COVID was a real critical point for me where I realized we just had to deliver some stuff. So anything that was on the periphery wasn't going to happen. It was a great way to focus the mind. If it's too difficult and it's not working, drop it and rethink. And that's a hard thing for you to do. Your ego doesn't let you do it, but actually, just walk away, drop it. Timing might be wrong, come back to it if it's right. Your customer is your biggest laser focus. Do not try to be all things to all men. You absolutely need to focus on who your customer is. Have one key priority and 3 priorities tops. I think in one of our strategy packs in John Lewis, we had 33 priorities, all coded with different letters. We were just never going to achieve any of them. And manage your time, not your work, and decisiveness is key. And I love this quote, never put your rifle on automatic. Okay, so personal touch. Paychecks can't buy passion. I think we all know this. It's really important in business to build relationships, have informal communication, be accessible and approachable and authentic. There's an example of a leader who had learned from another leader that when he did management by walking around, he got lots of feedback from his teams. And my teams know I used to walk up and down the floors constantly every day. That was a very long corridor. If I got to Christmas early one day, I'd have to flip it the next morning. But you learn so much from just simply going and chatting to the teams at their desks. And this leader had heard this, so he decided that he was going to do management by walking around. So he sent an agenda to the teams and told them at what time he was going to be at their desks, which kind of negated the whole point of it. Know what you're doing, know your teams, and a great example of this was Sam Walton from Walmart, who had an open door policy. He wanted to know what people thought and listen to them. Some days he had 80 people queuing for his office, so he then had to hire a team of teams to understand what people were thinking. But it was really important in understanding how happy his workforce were or not, and then listening to them and acting on it where possible. Don't confuse empowerment with detachment, but empowerment is really important. And the best example I have of this is when, late in John Lewis, we did some matrix working, and Elaine and Sarah, who are with me today, led a new own brand gifting project. Now, we were doing this at pace. Within 8 months, we were going to launch a brand new brand. That's really, really quick. But what we decided to do was to set up a matrix team, which included all the experts in one area. So Elaine was leading and managing it. She's one of the most organized people I've ever known, so I'm delighted to be working with her, because I'm not. And Sarah was buying the gifting goods. But we brought the online team in, we brought the marketing team in, we brought the PR team in, and we brought the building team. And at least once a week, they sat together and worked together. And it built the most incredible team dynamic I've ever seen. It was incredibly informal. No one had titles. No one even told you their second name. They just told you what they did. And that team decided on what was happening. I was only there to unblock the roadblocks. I literally did nothing. Genuinely did nothing until on a Friday afternoon, when I was at a very zen business course, I got a call at 4:30 from the head of building group to tell me that the 10 branches that were supposed to launch that next week weren't going to happen, that they'd had a problem with the fixtures because we'd been working at pace, and we weren't going to get what we needed done. Now, we had the whole of the press coming to John Lewis, Oxford Street on that Wednesday. We had the whole of the business press and the whole of the fashion press, and I was supposed to be launching this. So deep breaths, and I said, what can you do for me for next week? Can you do Oxford Street and Peter Jones? And they said, well, we'll endeavor to do this. And these were building group guys who I had tortured my entire life as a beauty buyer, because I was always bringing new brands, and they were like, Anna, we've got no budget, we've got no money, and you're not allowed to put it in that area. So I knew these guys well. I used to doorstop them on a Monday morning at 7:10 in the morning, because they never answered my emails. So I'd have to go to the desk and go, Bill, why have you not done it? So this same guy, Bill, said to me, I will do whatever I can, because this is my project, and I don't want it to fail. So they pulled it out of the hat. And it just shows you when passion and teamwork is there, you just deliver incredible results. It wasn't perfect, wobbled a little bit, some of it, but it was absolutely the right thing to do. And when we celebrated the end of that project, the building team, and particularly Bill, said to me, I'm so sorry we let you down. Will you let me be in another project of yours? I loved it. Will you let me do it again? And I'd never seen that kind of response. So if you can get teams working in a matrix way with a really clear purpose, you'll see incredible results. This is Maya Angelou. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I've probably had, in my whole 33 years, a handful of managers who've done this for me and leaders who've done it, all in kind of different ways. But great leaders inspire. They manage the paradox of hard and soft. They hold people up to incredibly high standards, which is really important, but they also go to great lengths to support them and give them feedback and make them the best version of themselves that they can be. Feedback is absolutely critical in this, particularly positive feedback. In John Lewis, we were always very good at even better if, but actually one of the key skills I did have was saying thank you to people. I always thanked my teams. I always gave them credit. One of the things I found tougher was the critical feedback. And I remember giving feedback to a buyer, and I was absolutely feeling sick to my stomach, thinking this was quite a personal piece of feedback that I needed to give her. I was dreading it. But I did it with honesty and openness. And this buyer said to me, "You've transformed my job. I didn't realize I was doing that. I really appreciate you giving me that feedback. So though it's tough to do, it's really, really important to do." A great leader is a teacher and a mentor. And that's your role, to make that team the best version they can be of themselves and to celebrate it. I also gave the CEO of one of the top beauty companies in the world some feedback. It was #1 day in his new, very plush offices in Bond Street. The carpets were so white, I was afraid to walk on them. But on his first day, he'd welcomed us over for a cup of coffee. And I knew that I was going to tell him that we're about to take his favorite brand out of his favorite branch, his favorite site, and replace it with the Mac piece of work that we'd done. And I knew he was not going to like it. And when I told him, I came with a pack of alternatives of where his brand could go, he was furious. You could see the steam coming out of his ears, day one in this office. And myself and my colleague were kind of looking at each other thinking, this is really not going to go well. But I have to say, although he blustered a bit and said, "You'll be doing this all over the place, this is unacceptable, I'm going to pull the brand," he actually said, "Look, I really appreciate your honesty and coming to talk to me early, offering me alternatives, and being really authentic about it." And later, when I moved from beauty, he took me out for a drink, and I'd said to him previously that it was his finest moment. He could have made us really uncomfortable. He could have pulled the brand. He could have done lots of things, but actually he didn't. And he said, "Anna, the reason I didn't is that I'd made a relationship with you. We had a great team relationship, and I understood that you had to deliver the message, and you did it with authenticity." And he said, "And you gave me the feedback and told me that it was my finest moment. And I used that when I was at a course. They went to exotic places like Morocco. We went to Cookham. And he said, I used that piece of feedback, and people said, we've never seen you like that. It was quite interesting for you to say that you'd managed your anger and you delivered in a way." So feedback is really, really important. And celebrating when people do things well is absolutely critical. So, communication. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. How many of us have been in those experiences? It seems incredibly obvious, but many leaders do not communicate well if they communicate at all. When you are a leader, you need to communicate up, down, sideways, individually, company-wide, oral, formal, informal. Communicate constantly. Communicate your vision and your strategy. Speak it, and say it again. Johnson & Johnson CEO spent 40% of his time talking strategy, and he said it was the most used time to get his team behind him. It's really important when you do communicate is that you're personal, reveal something about yourself. You're a human being. You work with human beings. Let people know who you are. Call a duck. Don't sugarcoat things. If you're going to lay people off, tell them you're going to lay them off. If you're going to give them bad news, don't respect them and give them the news in a way that they can understand. It's all about people, and you need to respect them. Many executives are totally rubbish at it. Encourage debate in informal atmospheres and draw out members of your team who don't talk as much, who are more reticent, and listen to them. You cannot overinvest in communication. And during COVID, this was particularly critical because most of it was taking place on a screen. And quite often, people would disappear off screen, and you think, are they okay? I haven't seen them. I'm not able to walk up and down and chat to them over coffee. So we put one-to-ones in with the team that were purely personal. They were nothing to do with business. There was a half hour every day for every one of my buyers. And if they wanted to cancel it, they cancelled it. But it was to talk about things about them and how they were feeling, because it was really important to understand what the impact of COVID was on people who weren't in the office, because they missed that team dynamic. And they could cancel it if they wanted to, which is a critical thing. They didn't have to turn up. Henry Ford, one of my personal favorite, crazy in some ways, but in other ways an amazing man. Everything comes to him who hustles while he waits. This was definitely one of my mantras in work. You absolutely have to keep things moving. Leaders of great companies have what's called an ever-forward style. They have personal growth in the company and the people and driving it forward. Quite often, Phil Knight will say, Nike, if you don't grow, you die. He was always moving forward. What was the next best thing? Work hard, but don't be a workaholic. Improve each day. Ask for feedback. Keep working on yourself as well. You know what your weaknesses are. You know what they are. Keep your energy up. Learn. Be a constant, lifelong learner. Take care of yourself physically, mentally, spiritually. Get enough sleep. Stay healthy, and do take time out. You constantly change. You maintain high energy. Every time you get given a project that's slightly uncomfortable, you're definitely at your best when you're right on your mettle. Always move yourself forward. Try to get involved in new things. Optimism and tenacity, those are the two of the key phrases that I often find my team called out, which I had. And one of the distinguishing features of great companies is that they don't stop trying to change and improve. And you can think of Disney and Ford and Motorola, Lego, who were nearly bankrupt maybe 15 years ago, who transformed their business with their licenses, and someone like Nike. But also touch the spirit when you're doing it. A great leader changes people. The leader as a teacher creates great teams. They tap something inside you which says, we can accomplish this together. I know we can because I believe in you. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a personal sort of star of mine, who just died last year, first amazing woman High Court judge, who championed women throughout her life. Her story is incredible. But she said, fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. At the age of 82, she was still doing 20 press-ups a day behind the High Court. I mean, I can't do 2. It's incredibly impressive. But she was the most amazing woman. And she also said that leadership is an art, not a science. Be a lifelong learner. Be authentic. I still make mistakes today, and I am still learning. And the guys and I who are starting retail consulting absolutely want to be focusing on the why and the how we're going to do our business. We're going to do it as a great team. And my final quote, thank you very much for listening, is, working in great teams is the best thing about working. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. We've got a bit of time for questions from the audience, if anyone would like to ask one. Just put up your hand, I'll bring the mic over. I think you've managed to answer everything, Anna. Look at that. I'm sure here we go.
Hi, Anna. I know you're going to try and help many of the suppliers who are exhibiting here. Can you sort of just summarize what you think you can bring to them?
So Sarah's going to talk more about this tomorrow, but Seema, I think, so we have genuinely got 100 years of experience between us. And what we did in our roles at John Lewis was we had suppliers pitching into us with product. And quite often we could see that A, maybe there wasn't the right pricing architecture, or it wasn't the right product, or it didn't have the right packaging. And what we can bring is that we can support suppliers and matching them up with the right retailers, looking at their product spec and actually saying, is this the right product specification? Is this the right look and feel? Is the branding right? And we haven't actually launched it, but we're already doing a work with someone. And what we can unlock for this company is that we understand how retail works as well. I've spent time on the shop floor. I understand the importance of selling gondola ends. Seema, you'll remember this. We did this in Cook Shop. I understand the importance of how that product looks and the fact that it needs to have enough critical mass to sit on a shop floor to give impact. So we can actually advise and support brands, suppliers, and retailers, and get them there quickly, because we know lots of people in this business, so we know where the right product proposition is. So we're hoping that we can be there to really, really support them.
Thank you. Any more questions from the audience?
Thank you, Anna, for a brilliant talk. It was really, really helpful.
Thank you. That's very kind.
There was one point when you talked about you've learned in your experience when to drop something and walk away, and when to risk something and go with it. And I wondered if you'd had any experience of working with a rebrand or a new logo, because in my small company, it's a social enterprise, so it is like a group team. But we're working with a graphics company that have come up with 3, after a long and drawn out, what's your mission, what's your vision, have come up with 3 images. And the feedback about it was totally split between the under 40s and the over 40s. And the under 40s loved this one, and the over 40s utterly hate it.
Gosh.
Now, I'm the person who'll have to lead, is leading this process. So we went back to the graphics company, and we bought of the under 40s preference. We said, could you do something a bit more? And now they've come back, and typically it's a kind of compromise. So the under 40s are going, maybe, and the over 40s are going, maybe. Now, I don't know how important a logo and a brand. We're only one shop. Our name is well known.
Yeah. Which
Do we
customer is
risk
most
it or
important?
don't we?
Which customer is most important to you? Are they equally as important, the under 40s and the over 40s? Are you attracting both?
No, we are attracting the over 40s women.
Yeah.
But we do want to reach out to the younger one, and that is our kind of vision for this year. I'm totally stuck whether we risk it and go, well, what's to lose, or whether, because we love it, that we just drop it.
I think it's a really tough one. I would go where I think the customer is, but I would also go a little bit with your gut. If you love it, go with it. I think it's important to get the logo right, but I don't think it's the most important thing. And John Lewis has been having this debate because we launched a new range to attract a younger customer. But John Lewis is still about a mid to premium customer and a customer. So you have to be very careful that you don't alienate these customers by going that way. But if your gut is for the one that you think is right for your over 40s mark, I tend to go there. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.